G'day and good to see you sticking with us throughout this podcast series. I'm Chris Hayton and you're listening to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. Jumping straight into part 2 of the small business and accounting considerations segment, I got the chance to catch up with Adam Wilson from Upside Accounting, who, like Jared Wilson from Craft Accounting, does a lot with the brewing and beverage industry. In 2008, Adam took over the Upside Accounting firm, formerly Monahan McLean & Co., which was a 30-year-old practice. Adam and his team provide much more than just traditional taxation and general accountancy services, as they offer a full range of business succession planning services and advice including business structure, cash flow management, bookkeeping software setup, business registrations, marketing and website development, business consulting and succession planning, and much, much more. Receiving advice from yet another expert in the small business and accounting field will give listeners further great takeaways to apply to their own business planning for their brewery building journey. So no mucking around here, let's dive straight into it, and I hope you enjoy part 2 of the segment with Adam Wilson from Upside Accounting. Welcome, Adam, to the Build Me a Brewery podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No, not a problem, mate. And I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day. You're based down in Melbourne, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And how is COVID treating you guys down there?
All working remotely since back in the start of March. So getting close to being let out to play with other people shortly.
Wow. So you're normally very office-based?
Office and out to local clients. So yeah, We've got clients based in most states around Australia. So most of those are serviced remotely anyway. But yeah, our local clients is a combination of out to clients' places, in my office, and everything in between.
Yeah, I guess the beauty of the technology out these days. Zoom, I wish I got on that bandwagon before this stuff went to shit. Everyone's made an absolute killing in shares, investing in Zoom before it all. So
yeah, I didn't get on those ones either.
No, but anyway, once again, thanks again for coming on the podcast. I've given the audience a short introduction about yourself, Upside Accounting. I actually came across your business just doing some Googling as to some accounting businesses that have worked with some craft breweries and brewery startups, and you had some good content on there for aspiring brewery owners to consider. So I thought it would be good to have you on and talk a bit about, I guess, the small business side of things, which, you know, essentially starting a small brewery is a small business. And those that haven't had experience like myself in running a small business, I think a lot of the content you'll share today will be very valuable for people starting out structuring the business. So, but before we get into all that, just to kick things off, tell us, I guess, a bit about yourself, how you got into the field of work you're doing, and also a bit about Upside Accounting and the services you offer.
Yeah, sure. I'm an accountant. I've been looking after small and medium-sized family businesses for a bit over 20 years now. So been running my firm for just coming up on 12 years. So seen a lot of the highs and lows through that time. So I started just before the GFC. Obviously, we've had COVID going on for the last, most of 2020. And in between, there's been a lot of good times. So being able to see both sides of business in those 12 years. I've had an interesting craft beer since the early 2000s. Did a bit of a backpacking jaunt around Europe and the US back in 2005. And that really opened my eyes to what was a lot bigger craft market in those areas that had developed ahead of where Melbourne was and Australia was at that time. Had a bit of a dabble in home brewing as well, but that's been on the back burner with a couple of young kids. I found didn't have a lot of spare time, and also the consumption had dropped back a bit. So I prefer these days to just get out and try a few from breweries around. So that's sort of my background into craft beer.
Yeah, excellent. And I guess if that's something of a bit of a passion and hobby for you, why not provide services to that industry? So I guess you have to have a bit of love for craft beer to sort of work with those businesses and understand those businesses, I imagine.
Yeah, 100%. So I saw that rather than going down that path of starting a brewery, that my skills were better used helping people who were running their own breweries.
Yeah, excellent. And I know that we were talking off air, probably not going into specific details of who the breweries that you've worked with, but roughly what number of breweries have you actually worked with, and have they always been at the startup level or more established?
Yeah, so more the startup guys. So definitely keen to get more involved with some breweries who've had some runs on the board, but are struggling to get to that next level that they're wanting to achieve. But yeah, my background's been in the guys who are sort of pre-commercialization, so going through the process, trying to understand what's involved, how they raise capital, how they bring everything together. Do they buy the premises? Do they have to rent? Looking at those sort of things in terms of the operational structure for the brewery, what that might mean in terms of the business structure. So are we set up as a company? Are there multiple entities involved, say, to hold the business premises versus the operating brewery as it sits off to the side, and looking at those sort of things. So, and then getting involved with the guys who have actually built a brewery and gotten to commercialization is where the fun really starts.
Well, I guess diving into the more specific content that I wanted our listeners to sort of take from today's episode, I guess the small business basics or small business 101, whatever you want to call it. For me, particularly, I'd like to know what are some of the common aspects new small business owners or more specifically brewery owners tend to overlook when starting out, structuring things and making things a bit more legalized and formal.
Yeah. So, I mean, brewery owners are very, very similar to any other business, but they do have some complexities to it that the others don't need to delve into. But the priority is really understanding that you are running a business. Okay. So most people have probably gone from that hobby level and wanting to take it to that next step, but realizing that we're running a business is key. You've likely got a fair bit of money tied up in this. So it might be yourself, your family, friends. You want to make sure that we're putting the right step forward to get off and make a good fist of it. So that's where having the right advice and understanding that perhaps you don't have all of the skills to deal with all aspects of the brewery. Obviously, you've probably got a couple of them nailed, otherwise you wouldn't be going down this path. But looking at getting the right team around you to help support you. So that's the key part. So that might be lawyers, it might be marketing people, obviously accounting on the finance, tax, that side of things. So it's really about looking at where your skill set sits and making sure that wherever you've got some gaps, that you bring the team in to help make the business complete.
And in your experience, why do some small businesses fail and those or others succeed?
Yep. So it probably comes down to the old Benjamin Franklin quote, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So looking at, again, all aspects of the business and saying, how do we want to run this brewery? So there are a number of ways that you might want to go down the path of. So you may be setting up a brew pub. You may be setting up a manufacturing facility. So you're wholesaling or retailing all of your production. Each of these has different aspects to them, and you need to know the ins and outs of what that means. And there's no right or wrong answer here. It's what you want as the brewery owner. Yeah, but the choices that you make at that point then flow on to what you can expect from your brewery.
So I guess to maybe frame the rest of the questions, and maybe I should have done this earlier on, probably setting up a bit of a case study, and probably like myself and a lot of other listeners, we're probably starting out with a few mates or a few people that we know really well, and we're looking at getting into business. So I guess to put myself out there as a case study, myself and a few other mates are seriously considering opening a brewery. We're discussing different models and, potentially looking at a premises and looking at engaging with local council. We're all looking at putting in equal shares of money to start out with, and then seeing where that goes, and maybe we'd be able to attract some private investment down the line. So for those people starting out that way, what advice would you, or what are some of the things that they should be considering first out when engaging with an accountant, or what are some of the advantages of using an accountant to help set up a business, equally amongst, a few business partners?
Yeah. So I suppose the main thing there is that as the brewery owner or owners, you can often get lost in the details and not see the bigger picture. So that's where having someone ride shotgun with you and help review what your plans are, look at making sure that the assumptions that you've made in terms of how you're going to sell your beer, what profit margins you're going to have based on how you're selling that beer, make sure that that's all robust. Because at the end of the day, if you start out with a group of people, they've got a limited amount of cash that they can tip into the business, or most people do. It's not bottomless pits of money. So we need to know that the cash that we've got behind us now is going to get us to that next step, whatever that might be. Because yes, there is capital raising opportunities, but it can be difficult, particularly if you don't have the runs on the board.
Okay. And I guess why should small business owners look at engaging with an account? Could they? I hear a lot of stories of small business owners not even looking at doing it on their own. Maybe getting an Excel spreadsheet to record transactions, or buying MYOB or something like that. I guess, what are the significant benefits of using an accountant in the early days of starting a small business?
Yeah, look, and starting any business, and a brewery is no different. We need to be watching what we're spending. So I definitely understand that. But at the same time, you can often get yourself into hot water before you've even realized what you've done, and it then becomes more costly to unwind. So depending on the skills of your team, so it's definitely a matter of utilizing the people who have these skills that can steer you away from the traps that are common in the industry. So whether that's the brewery structured in the right way, that the shareholders have either equal rights or different rights depending on what you guys want as a team, is important, because getting this wrong at the start will snowball down the track. So we've got the opportunity, particularly at the start out phase, that everyone's on board and at the same position at that point in time, right? Yeah. As we move forward, people can often diverge in terms of the way that they thought it was going to run and the way it is running. And we need to make sure that things like shareholders agreements are in place to be able to deal with people buying or selling, to know whose responsibilities are what, and just to get it all open and honest with the shareholders at the outset. So things like that can become critically important.
And I guess talking about at the very beginning and the beauty of having it at the start, there are different ways that I guess a small business can set itself up, the business structure side of things. So are you able to talk through a couple of those examples of how you could set up a business? You've got the sole trader aspect, you've got the partnership entity type, proprietary limited. So can you walk us through all the different types and I guess the differences between them?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose starting by saying there's no right or wrong answer here. And it's all going to come down to the specifics of your circumstances in terms of why you structure things one way or the other. But just to go through them. So sole trader, you're essentially operating in your own name with a trading name attached to yourself. So the benefits there are that it's no cost to set up. It's very transparent, but it does have a number of issues in that your personal assets are then at risk if anything happens with the brewery. So that's generally the number one rule that we're trying to protect. So we don't want personal assets, your house, anything else lost if the brewery fails, unless it's been used as security, then that's part of the risk. But the general setup is more than likely going to involve a company setup. That gives us a flat rate of tax. So at the moment, that's 27.5% on profits. It also opens the door for potentially being involved in the R&D space. So only companies can access R&D tax concessions. So that is something that may be attractive to breweries down the track. The other side of things that we've potentially got is looking at, so if we were to own the brewery premises, that could be in a different structure rather than the operating brewery. And then that would be something to look at. And often that can mean that the team that's involved in the shareholding of the brewery might not necessarily be the same as the ones who own the property, but the brewery pays rent to the property owner. So that can be a way where you might have people with different levels of cash that they're looking to put in for the brewery investment. They might hold a higher percentage of the property asset, and everyone's equal from the brewery itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I've dived into a bit of research about setting up things as a company. So that's your proprietary limited. I noticed that with proprietary limited companies, and that's what appealed to me the most was, yes, that your personal assets weren't exposed if things were to go wrong. But I've also noticed that there's a couple of things that need to go along with it. So obviously an ABN to begin with, potentially even an ACN, a business name. And then I've also seen that is a constitution, a set of rules that need to be written for that company. Are you able to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so like this is the sort of stuff where we're managing that on behalf of our clients. That's all packaged up and included. So the ACN is part of that original formation, as is the constitution. The ABN and the tax file number is something that we need to register for with the ATO. Again, it's something that you could do yourself if you want to. If you're trying to keep your hands involved in every single thing, by all means. But there's not a lot of cost in terms of doing that from having your accountant set that up. Yeah,
so your services will include the whole suite of the business setup. So ABN registration, business name registration, right through the constitution and the whole shebang.
Yeah, that's right. So with a company set up, if your company is using the brewery name, then you won't need to get a separate business name. That'll be part of the package. If you're looking to trade as a different name from your company, then you may need a business name, and you may have different products that you're looking to push out to market under different names, and that might be a reason to have different brands, which would be business names attached to that company.
Right. Okay. And so, all under the same ABN, but just different business name registrations.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. And I've also heard of terms like, well, when it comes to a small business managing their books, cash basis transactions and accrual accounting transactions or accrual accounting method of recording your transactions. Are you able to talk a bit about that and what the pros and cons of choosing one against the other?
Yeah, sure. So if we take the cash basis first, essentially what that means is that you're only including as income the invoices that you've actually been paid for. So, for example, if we sell 10 kegs to the pub down the road and you're issuing those on, say, 30-day terms or whatever your terms might be, that's not included as income until the pub actually pays you for those kegs. The same is the story on the expense side of things. So costs are only deductible when you've actually paid for them. So, for example, if you've taken a delivery of raw ingredients, so hops and grain, whatever it might be, and you don't have to pay the supplier for, say, 14 days after end of month or whatever it might be, that won't be a deduction for you until you physically made that payment. So cash basis, you're only paying tax, and let's include GST in the same breath. You're only paying the tax when you've actually received or outlaid the money. Now, on the flip side, the accruals method is always going to happen sooner. So in that example where we sold the kegs to the pub, when we're shipping the kegs with the invoice, it's income to us on that day. Now, if the pub doesn't pay us for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, it's still income to us on day one. So that can be critical from a cash flow perspective, because not only have we paid the excise, not only are we going to have paid the GST, but we might even have to have paid the income tax, and we might not have received the cash from the customer. So we need to bear that in mind. It also plays in on the purchases side of things. So in that example where we're purchasing the raw ingredients, you'll receive the invoice when it shows up at your brewery. It's claimable on that day. We might not pay it until next month or the month after, but we get to claim it earlier. So the businesses with a turnover up to $10 million have the choice which method they use, but it's really just a timing difference, but it can have important cash flow considerations. So depending on what's happening with your brewery, you need to think about that. More than often, it's probably going to be the cash basis is going to be best for the smaller guys. And it's something that we can review as the business sort of changes from one business cycle to the next.
Right. And along with managing your books, and regardless of whatever method you choose, cash or the accrual side, what systems would you recommend for a small brewery business to have set up in the early days, or maybe even for those that have been in operation, maybe doing it a bit more dark ages with an Excel spreadsheet to record things? What sort of software would you sort of recommend for having set up to manage all those transactions?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, you could be doing this all on a spreadsheet, but what you're going to find is that for the small amount of costs that you're going to save for an accounting package, you're going to be spending a huge amount of time building that spreadsheet every week or month or quarter. Okay, so one of our favorites at Upside Accounting is Xero. So that's a cloud-based accounting platform. It will handle all the bells and whistles that you need, but it also chop down to the bare bones as well. So, and they've got the ability to flex between. So for example, when we're starting out, we might just want the real bottom of the line package that gives us some of the benefits of not having that spreadsheet. And then as we grow, we just tier up to get the more bells and whistles that we need. And Xero gives you that ability at the flick of a switch to just change.
Excellent. Yeah, I have heard a lot about Xero, and I hear a lot of other small business owners using that software. It can be paired with other software as well, because that's purely recording the transactions. But is there other software for the reporting side as well that you pair Xero with? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, 100%. So the benefit of a lot of the softwares these days is that they talk to each other. And what we don't want to do is have to be entering the same piece of data into multiple different softwares. So we want to be able to have those different softwares talk to each other. And if we enter it into one system and it needs to go into another, that it flows through. So, for example, Xero does have payroll capabilities, but you might want to have some more bells and whistles around managing your team, say timesheets and that sort of thing. You might want to look at one of the other packages that satisfies you there, and have that flow from say Deputy, which is one that looks after things like that, into Xero from an accounting perspective, so that it's all there for you, and that you can deal with your obligations with, say, the tax office without having to chop and change between different systems.
Yeah, so it's not like having to duplicate what's in Xero into another program. It just sort of talks to each other and streamlines it all.
100%. So what we want to do is have the administration side of the brewery, as much of the heavy lifting being dealt with by the software, rather than having someone crunching the books unnecessarily.
And just on the, I guess, the reporting side, what does a small business owner responsibility-wise have in regards to sales, tax, and BAS reporting? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yep. So again, it's going to depend on size, but most breweries, well, we're going to want to be getting above the 75 grand threshold where we need to be registered for GST, either on day one or very quickly. Otherwise, we're not going to be making much money at all. So GST is going to be one that we're going to need to be registered for. So that could be either monthly, quarterly, or annually, depending on your size. Part of the obligations around employees is the PAYG on their wages. And again, depending on the size of your team, that will be either monthly or quarterly. Then we've got things like excise and also income tax.
Yeah, and that was another question I had in regards to the excise. It's obviously closely linked to the liquor industry and beverage industry. So talk a bit about, I guess, the responsibilities that a brewery owner has regarding excise and how it's calculated.
Yep. So, I suppose the main types of licenses that are probably going to apply in this area are manufacturer's license and the storage license. So small breweries, so we're talking up to 10 million of turnover, will be able to apply for periodic settlement permission, which gives the brewery the ability to release product throughout the month, but only report the excise total at the end of the month, rather than prepaying to release the goods each time they're sending stuff out of the brewery. So that would be reported for the month, and it would be paid and lodged on the 21st of the following month. So, for example, we're in October now. Once the month of October finishes, by the 21st of November, we would need to have lodged the excise return, which details all of the deliveries that have been made during that month, and pay the excise duty.
And I noticed that, well, I've heard a lot about the state government, or sorry, not the state government, the federal government offering some relief to small business owners regarding excise rebates. Currently, it's up to 100 grand. And there's even rumours of that increasing up to as much as 350 or 300K rebates. Do you know much about that side of things?
Yeah, so the excise refund scheme is what you're talking about there. And so that allows the brewery to claim back 60% of the excise that it's paid at the moment, up to 100K per financial year. So the things that we need to tick off there are obviously that you hold the manufacturer's license, that you've paid excise. One of the things that we need to look at is also that you're independent of any other entity that is involved in the alcohol manufacturer sector. So if you do have people who are controlling or majority shareholders of your brewery that also hold an excise license, you want to be careful around that excise refund scheme for the new brewery.
Right. And yeah, because I mean, I know a lot of small breweries, especially around my area, have been taking advantage of those excise rebates during the COVID period and has sort of helped them stay afloat during it. So that's something that definitely new brewery startups need to consider early on how to go about getting that rebate.
That's right. And that should form part of your cash flow forecasts when you're mapping things out.
Right. And I guess diving into more about how small business owners can better understand their business in regards to their finances. I know that I've been told to look at preparing a business plan when I'm starting out, just to structure it out, how the business is going to look. And I've also know certain parts that have to have forecasting aspects of it and how you're going to achieve it and what your sales, what your expenses are, what your profit's going to look like. How can a small business owner better understand their bottom line and so forth?
Yes, you touched on a really important aspect there in terms of the planning upfront. So having that business plan, it shouldn't just be something that you've put together because you have to do it, say for bank capital raising or any other purpose. You should actually want this document prepared, particularly where you've got multiple owners, because it really does help set the rules that this business is going to operate under. And not that we're planning to fail, but you do want to know if things go pear-shaped, that we all understand what the mechanisms are that are going to take place.
Right.
So that's really important. But I suppose getting back to the finances and the bottom line and that aspect of the question, you don't need to become an accountant, but you do need to know your numbers. So each brewery is going to be different because of the strategic decisions that they've made, but you have to know your crucial numbers and your key performance indicators, because those are the things that are going to tell you that you're heading in the right direction or you're heading towards disaster and you need to correct some actions quickly. So these KPIs should be tracked religiously, and some might be daily, some might be weekly, monthly, quarterly, but they should all be helping the brewery drive towards that goal, which was mapped out in that business plan.
Can you share with us some of those key performance indicators?
Well, it could come down to things like production throughput. So say that we know that we need to produce X number of litres per week or month to be meeting our targets. Otherwise, there's no chance that we can make a profit. Yeah, so it may come down to we've got a mix between sales at the brew pub, sales on a wholesale level, and sales on a retail level. And we need to watch that mix because each of those have got different profit margins. And so all sales are good, but some sales are better.
Yeah, I've been told that, by a number of brewery owners early on in the podcast, that supplying to pubs, supplying kegs, there's a lot of cash flow problems there just due to, these are large organizations, a lot of these pubs that are a part of, and, they just take forever to pay. I know that Pat from Willie the Boatman has mentioned they've changed their business model to reflect more packaging and bottle shop sales. They get paid a lot quicker from bottle shop owners, and the whole premise around cash flow and in the brewing industry is quite crucial. I guess it is to any small business owner. So what is the importance of cash flow management and how can someone, I guess, better manage that and make sure people are paying on time?
Yeah, so cash flow is crucial in any business, but especially in a brewery, where as a brewery, you're dealing with purchasing your raw ingredients. You've got a manufacturing schedule that you need to stick to. You've got the excise that we've touched on. You've got GST and tax. and you've got getting paid by your customers. Now, you need to be juggling all of those balls at the same time. We can't concentrate just on one area because we're going to be dropping the ball in another area. So to keep everything flowing through the business and profitability and cash flow where we need to make sure that we're managing everything as a one. So, for example, if you're doing everything through the production side of things, but you're not getting paid by your customers, then you don't have cash to put into raw materials to start the process over again.
Right. Do you see a lot of, I guess, small brewery owners starting out, or even small business owners? They've tried to juggle all these things in the beginning. They thought, I could just knock up an Excel spreadsheet. I can do a bit of research. I've got to report the excise every month or so. I've got to, recall what's going in, what's going out. Do you always seem to come in when the books are a complete mess, and then they've just realised that I can't manage this on my own? Is that normally when you tend to come in, or do you see a lot of business owners engaging you very early in the piece?
Look, there is the whole breadth across that, but yeah, definitely across my my time, we've definitely been engaged when things are a basket case. So the issue that you've got there is that because things have gone so long, there's a lot more effort to correct things. And often we're talking about a number of years. So that then brings to play, say, tax debts that have been built up because we're a couple of years behind. So you haven't saved yourself any money by doing all of that stuff yourself. You've got it into a giant mess, and then you've got to pay someone to unwind that all. So it is a common thing, and it's not. I'm not just talking brewery, but I'm talking business across all industries. I find a lot of people want to manage every single thing themselves, and we need to understand that your particular skills are probably best used in one or a couple of areas of your business, but not all of them. And to get someone to manage some of those areas that you don't best do can be, it's a cost, but there should also be a benefit that's provided because of that.
Yeah, and that's good advice. And that's something that Pete from Wayward mentioned in an earlier episode is, there needs to come a time where, you either become the head brewer, or do you become the general manager or CEO of the business to run the business operating side of things. And I guess what, lean into what you just said there is, if your strengths aren't in the numbers, potentially look at outsourcing that or bringing someone in to best manage that for you.
That's right. Yeah. So, and I'm not talking just finance. This could be around your advertising and marketing. It could be around your sales. There's a whole number of different areas in your business, and one person can't possibly manage it all. And if one person is going to manage it all, it's also going to mean that the amount that brewery can generate is less, because you've got so much coming through one person. So that person's got to be the pointy end of the funnel, and things are going to get blocked up because one person can't deal with all decisions every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's, like you said, figuring out where if there is a few people involved in the business startup, figuring out where everyone's strengths lies. If someone is better at the brewing part, do that. Someone's better at the staff management or the day-to-day business operations, do that. And, and even breaking it down to the sales and advertising side, the building of the brand. So, and that's what some other episodes in this podcast will touch on as well, just dissecting all that. And I know that I like to have a finger on a lot of things in terms of knowing what's going on. And I guess it's going to be a thing that I've got to realize is separating myself from certain aspects of running a small business rather than thinking that I can be a jack of all trades and maybe a master of none. So, and I can imagine that's why a lot of small businesses start out that way, because finance and costs are probably the biggest stress starting out. I know that me thinking right now is, how am I going to fund this business? Where can we cut costs? And I'd say that a lot of small business owners will cut costs by maybe not paying the fee for an accountant to manage their books, or maybe not paying that monthly fee for Xero to manage their transactions or account keeping. And yeah, I can see how things can then eventually end up pear-shaped and they're paying for it in the long run.
Yeah, that's right. And so I suppose what I'm saying as a business owner is that you don't need to completely remove yourself from one of these functions, but sitting over the top of it as that business owner and having, whether it's the accounting, whether it's the marketing, whether it's the sales teams, reporting up to you and feeding back the information that they're doing. So if we take from the accounting side of things, you don't need to be doing the bookkeeping work. You could pay a bookkeeper to do that stuff for relatively low money, but that then frees you up to generate, whether that's signing up new customers, whether that's developing new products, whether that's creating a new brand to sell in a different market. These are the things as a business owner you should be looking at, not necessarily doing the stuff that you could pay $30 an hour for.
Talking a bit about, I guess, costs involved for employing or outsourcing the accounting aspect. And listen, you don't have to go into the specific details of what upside accounting charge or anything like that, but are you able to give the listeners a sort of an expected budgeting cost for maybe engaging an accountant? I know it will vary brewery and business to business, depending on the scope of responsibility that they outsource to that accountant, but are you able to give us some idea of what that might look like?
Look, it is pretty varied. So it does depend on how much is going to be provided internally within the business. So whether that's the owners or they've got some staff there that are going to do some of the function. So what we do is work with our clients to say, how much do you need from us? We can provide all of it, but if you've got the capacity internally to deal with some bits and we either oversee or you're completely happy with it, then that's the path we should go down. So often that might mean that we train someone up to deal with making sure that the basics of the bookkeeping function are dealt with. And that we're more involved with the reporting to the owners. And so that might be monthly for once things have really got up and rolling and we've got stuff to deal with. It might be quarterly for a startup and they're just wanting to get that feedback and check in. And that can involve the questions that you need to bounce back and forth around strategy and direction of the brewery and where we're heading.
Right. So, yeah, so offering the full suite of services, which, you know, will cover all the aspects of a small business operation. And then, like you said, if you've got that internal capacity, selecting or depending on the customer, selecting different services that suit what they can and can't do.
Yeah, that's right. So often this is sort of part education where we sometimes people don't know where they're starting. And so we need to go through that process to say, well, have we got a business plan? Where's the capital coming from? Going through all of these scenarios and saying, well, we can provide some stuff or we can do it all for you. We want you involved as a business owner because at the end of the day, it's your business. I'm not telling you how to run your brewery. I'm helping you trying to create your vision and turning it into reality.
Yeah. Well, we've covered quite a lot of content there, Adam, and I know that people are probably, like myself, scratching their heads as to, Jesus, I'd never even considered a lot of this when starting out. And that's why I hope this will create some light bulb moments for people. But any closing advice or thoughts on people starting out looking at structuring the business formally with business partners or anything? Anything that you will suggest as a priority that they should be considering when starting out on the business setup?
Yeah, I really encourage everyone when they're going through this process. It's all about thinking on the strategy and understanding the direction of the brewery. So having great beers is not automatically going to make you a great brewery these days. All right. You've likely invested substantial money into this, or you will invest substantial money into it. You need to be thinking strategically to make sure that you're going to reach those goals. And if you don't have the skill sets in any of the different areas that we've touched on, make sure that you're building up your team so that you've got people that you can rely on. They might not be on the books every month, but you know who to go to if you've got questions. And having those points of contact is critically important. So marketing, it might be quality control, finance, legal, even just general mentors in the industry. I mean, you would have found, Chris, people are willing to share their experiences, reaching out. You're not by yourself here. Getting out and involved in the community, the craft community, and talking with people will help you stop making errors that other people have done and give you a greater chance of success.
Yeah, great advice. And I guess just on Upside Accounting and the services and that you offer, is there anything that you want to share with the listeners at the moment? Anything you'd like to plug, how they can contact you?
So I love to hear from any of your listeners around where they're at in their journey. So any of the questions that we've sort of talked about in terms of setting up software that they're using or considering using in their business, any nagging issues that they're having trouble resolving, or if they've hit sort of a plateau in their business and they're not sure where the next step is, definitely reaching out. Best probably contacting by email. So I can be contacted at adam@upsideaccounting.com.au and we can branch out from there.
And so, because you've been based in Melbourne, your services geographically, where do they reach?
So we've got clients in most states around Australia. So Perth, Brisbane, Sydney, majority are Melbourne based, but with the technology that's available to us, and COVID's thrust a lot upon us, being able to work remotely is so easy these days. So jumping on a Zoom call, working through things, the benefit of having cloud-based systems are that we can log in from anywhere and we're all looking at the same data. It's just so easy these days. The world's becoming smaller and our reach is bigger.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Adam, for coming on today and sharing some insight about accounting and small business basics. Once again, everyone, that was Adam Wilson from Upside Accounting.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. That concludes our small business and accounting considerations segment. Next week, we move into our licensing and government compliance segment, which is a 3-part series on all things you need to know about dealing with all levels of government in your planning and opening of your brewery. I sit down with a liquor licensing professional as well as a town planner with tons of experience with brewery owners, and I also had the pleasure of being able to talk to Inner West Council Mayor Darcy Byrne to talk about the big push their council has made in recent years towards supporting the exploding craft beer scene in their area of Sydney. As always, if you are liking the podcast so far and find the content useful, please give us a follow and rating on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow us on all our social media handles, as well as visiting our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au. And much more complimentary content will be coming your way if you sign up to our mailing list. I'm Chris Hayton, your host, and this is the Build Me a Brewery podcast.